Hi guys, in the wake of Trump's tariff wars, recently former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has urged Malaysia to pivot towards China in the face of growing American hostility. He justified his position by claiming that, quote, China may invade, but it does not colonize. In an interview with Bloomberg, Mahathir made it sound as if China is a benevolent regional power, while Trump's America is a wrecking ball, not only intent on damaging the world, but hurting itself also in the process. This is what Mahathir said further. The quote, the fact is that China is a neighbor and has been a neighbor of Malaysia for almost 2,000 years. He said, the attitude of China is different from Europeans. The Chinese may invade, but they do not colonize, Dr. Mahathir said, to emphasize his newfound admiration of China. Now, I say newfound because it is hard to say why Mahathir is suddenly saying so many positive things about China today. While it's normal for people to hold different views about other nations in different times, relationships is, after all, always something that always fluctuate, guys, and thus our opinions about the people that we have a relationship with will also change according to the fluctuation. But we must also remember that Mahathir holds a distinctly racialist worldview. So his opinion might not actually be based on the natural fluctuations in relationship between Malaysia and China, but just race-based, because Mahathir tends to have this sort of racialist views. Mahathir does, for example, as we all know, believe things like Jews are hook-nosed, stingy, and trying to rule the world by proxy. He's also has said repeatedly, repeatedly has said the Malays to him, I'm quoting him, lazy, ungrateful, and untrustworthy. He doesn't have great views about non-Malays either. In his infamous book, The Malay Dilemma, for example, and various commentaries that he has made throughout his long career, especially recently, he has given an unending amount of unflattering views about non-Malays too. In other words, Mahathir is someone who is unabashed in ascribing intrinsic racial qualities to entire races. Surprisingly, however, despite seeing everybody else in a racial terms, Mahathir tends not to see himself or his family or his friends in this sort of racial terms. For example, while he thinks that Malays are lazy, ungrateful, and untrustworthy, he said, not me, despite insisting that he is a Malay time and time again, Mahathir doesn't seem to think of himself as lazy, ungrateful, or untrustworthy. I find that to be quite ironic, very, very ironic. But anyway, while some of us might say that Mahathir only holds negative views about China previously by saying things like the previous government was selling the country to China, or making veiled comments about neo-colonialism in reference to China, and hinting that the Chinese national, this was quite recent. He was also saying Chinese nationals can easily disappear in Malaysia, as if to suggest that China is already sending an influx of its people to our shore. Because he was in opposition at the time and simply using China as a proxy to attack the government. But I think we shouldn't underestimate how racially joined this Mahathir's worldview truly is. His opinions of China may be less about politics and expediency and more about how he views the Chinese race in general. Anyhow, regardless of why Mahathir has rediscovered his love for China, I actually agree with his conclusions. I also think that Malaysia should choose the China over the West. If I disagree with him at all, it is not because of his conclusion, but because of his reasoning. The global conflict between the West and China is no longer a question of if, but when. In any great power rivalry, neutrality is rarely sustainable. Countries that attempt to stay neutral in a zero-sum game often end up distrusted by both sides. When two powerful friends fight, choosing neither side can not only mean losing both, it can also mean we might make both of them our enemies. It is indeed a very difficult position that we are in. Some might say that we are in a damned if you do, damned if you don't position. Not only us, probably most of the countries in the world are going through the same situation. But in this sort of position, the best thing to do is probably to cut your loss by choosing with strength. The important point here is with strength. To retain one friend, then lose both. Or cause both friends to turn against you out of suspicion and doubt because you did not choose either of them. Between the West and China, like Mahathir, I also think that the friend that we should choose is China. Simply because it is China, not the West, that I think will play a more decisive role in Southeast Asia's future. The great rivalry between the East and the West will likely last for decades. Decades. In this period, the United States will likely eventually focus more on Europe and the Americas, while it is China that will zero in on Asia, especially in the South China Sea region and the broader Southeast Asian region. Since China is poised to become the hegemon of our region, the smart thing for Malaysia to do is prioritize our relationship with Beijing, not Washington. But I part ways with Malaysia when it comes to the reason why we should do this. I find Mahathir's argument that the Chinese do not colonize simply because that is who they are as a race is not only racially charged but historically and factually wrong. This notion that Asian superpowers like China or India are inherently different from the Western powers, because that they are peaceful, inward-looking and non-expansionist is strictly for the birds. Yes, historically, China and India didn't establish global empires like the British or the Dutch, but that probably had more to do with economics than moral constraint. From the 16th to the 19th century, China alone formed 25 to 35% of the world's economy. Together with India, they probably held half or more of the world's wealth. In other words, they were so rich internally that they had little reason to look outward. Why wage war abroad when everything you want is already at home? But that doesn't mean that they are pacifists. Far from it. We all know this. They were not pacifists. Both China and India have a long and bloody history with violence and warfare. Dynasties, kingdoms, and warlords were constantly battling each other for wealth, prestige, and power in both this ancient Asian superpower. The only difference is that when the Asian superpowers engaged in violence and conquest, they tended to fight not abroad but at home. Most likely because that's where all the wealth was. If the tables were turned, if the wealth and resources had been outside of their border, there is no reason to believe that China or India would have refrained from conquest out of principle. Power, not virtue, determines the scope of ambition. Western powers like Britain, the Netherlands, Portugal came eastwards to us because they were poor and we were rich. They came because they wanted what we had. We did not go westward, not because we respected them, but because we had no use for them. The truth is simple. People covet what they lack. And the powerful, regardless of race, regardless of culture, regardless of religion, act on desire, opportunity, and ambition, not to satisfy some racially infused impulse, as Mahathir seems to believe. Today, however, the landscape has shifted. China is no longer the world's wealthiest country. Okay lah, China is actually quite wealthy, but it came from a long period of poverty lah, yeah. Today, its economy is strained, its population is aging, youth unemployment is high. India is also in a similar bind. These are no longer self-satisfied and wealthy civilizations. These are, as a matter of fact, hungry civilizations, and hungry powers do not sit still. So no, while I don't believe that China wants to colonize Malaysia, at least not directly, but I completely reject Mahathir's racial theory that the Chinese don't colonize, as if there is something innately in the Chinese DNA that makes them allergic to conquest. Rather than being anything about the Chinese that gives us any reason to believe that they are not given to colonize, I think it is Mahathir's racially warped lens that leads him to make such simplistic and dangerous conclusions. If I put myself in China's shoes, I actually see no moral reason why I wouldn't consider invading and colonizing a country like Australia. If I could do it and get away with it. The important part is I must be able to do it and get away with it. Australia, after all, is a vast, rich in resources and sparsely populated territory. Its current rulers are descendants of European settlers who displaced indigenous people of Australia. The Australians are not even from around here. From a cold, real political perspective, why wouldn't a rising Asian superpower like China take back what the West forcibly took from Asia when Asia was weak, if it is strong enough to take it? Of course, reality is more complicated. War carries enormous costs. There are nuclear weapons in this world today, and there are also military and strategic alliances to consider as well. But the question isn't what China can do, it's what China would do if it could. The answer to me is quite simple. China would do what every great superpower throughout the history of humanity have done. They will do whatever it takes to be on top, because this is what everybody wants. They want to be on top. Anyway, my point here is that the key variable as to whether China will colonize us or not is not race, but desire, ambition, opportunity, and relationship. This is why Malaysia must choose carefully. We cannot surrender ourselves to cockamamie racial theories about how some races don't colonize and other races rule the world by proxy, or how some races are innately innocent, or other races are intrinsically mercenary, as how Mahathir tends to believe it, but ground our views on how the world works in reality as it is. We should choose China and develop a closer relationship with China, not because it is morally superior, but because it is strategically poised to be the winner in our region, at least for one generation or two generations to come. In geopolitics, if you cannot be the winner, the next best thing is to be on the winning side. At the same time, we must be fully aware that when the dragon awakens, it will be hungry and it will be looking everywhere for a good meal. If we are already in its corner, if it sees us as a friend, there is less likely that it will be us, the mouse deer, that China will be thinking of to make its next meal. This is the cold hard truth, Laya. Deep down, I believe all of us already know this because it is our experience will testify to us that this is the cold hard truth. Whether it's between individuals, whether it's between nations, whether it's between civilization, in the end, it is human nature to want to be on top and to prevent us from falling down because we all know that in this world, this is how you become happy. Those on top are happy, those at the bottom are miserable. It's as simple as that. Everybody wants to be happy, nobody wants to be miserable, so everybody will be trying to go on top while making sure that they don't fall downwards. This is the game that we play. This is the game that everybody plays, Laya, and it's best that we see the game as it is so that we don't outplay ourselves. Let us not have some cockamamie racial theory or believe in some notion that there are some good race, some exploitative race, some innocent race, some naive race, or all sort of this cockamamie and unjustifiable theories that will only cause us to fall down and become the people that is miserable, instead of being the people who can legitimately play this game to go up to be we can't be the winner. I don't think Malaysia can be the winner because we are too small to be the winner. But the next best thing for us to do is to be on the winning side, and we can be on the winning side if we ground our thinking to reality and make decisions according to the thinking and the theories that is grounded in realities. Anyway, thanks for watching this episode, guys. As always, take care, stay safe, and see you again in the next episode. Have a good day, guys.